Live from Fairfax, it's the Inside Scoop, Virginia. All the news Virginians want to know. Here's your host.
Welcome to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is Shannon, and I'll be your host this evening. We have with us Mark Sickles, who is a Virginia delegate in the 43rd District, and this will be our Virginia Politics Hour, doing a slight recap of the legislative session that concluded at the end of February, the high points, the low points, and maybe a little bit of the political controversy in between. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Good to be here, Shannon.
I guess what needs to be tackled head on is the budget. I know that, given the economic decline of the state, there was a lot of controversy surrounding it in general, and then we had the federal government stepping in.
Right.
So can you paint in broad strokes the dynamics that went down?
In the House, we passed a bill that restored many of the governor's cuts. As our viewers probably know, in the states, we can't have an unbalanced budget. We have to balance our budget constitutionally. And so we had a $3.7 billion shortfall in our existing two-year budget, which we were halfway through the first year when we go to Richmond of the two-year budget. And so the governor had proposed many severe cuts to health care, particularly hospitals, nursing homes, cuts to programs for in the Medicaid area for disabled children, things like that. And so the House actually put that back, even though people were saying prior to the session that we spend too much money, we should cut. But the House even put that money back. But we did it in kind of a backhanded way. We borrowed the money from the Clean Water Improvement Fund, and which theoretically had a balance in it. We didn't think on the Democratic side that it really had a balance. Our leader did some research on it and showed that the money was actually committed. Nevertheless, that passed out of the House with a few votes against it, and the Senate had decided to wait for a week until all we needed was a week to find out whether the stimulus bill was going to pass at the federal level. And of course, the stimulus did pass, and the way that is structured, there is money that could immediately be put to use to refund or put money back in the cuts that the governor had made to education, to health care, to public safety. And so the Obama stimulus package really saved our state. We were the first state in the country to use the stimulus package to balance the budget. I think other states will be looking at us and how we did it. There's a lot more money in the stimulus package than what we used to fill those cuts, and that will be distributed over time with more selection criteria and more oversight by the administration. But we did not, as General Assembly part-time legislature, get into that deeply. $700 million we have for transportation. And of course in Virginia, transportation monies are distributed by the Commonwealth Transportation Board in concert with VDOT, working on priority projects that come through our annual 6-year program development.
And I'm sure that's a long list.
Long list, and $700 million is a nice chunk of change to have. It won't make too big a dent around the state, but will help us fill some huge voids. Down in my part of the county, in South County, Fairfax County, the 2.5-mile link of the Fairfax County Parkway that goes through the engineer proving ground where the federal government is building a $1.3 billion building to house the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. That road needs, by everybody's estimation, 4 interchanges to get in and out of the new the new complex, and only 2 of the 4 interchanges were funded, and that's why the president came out to Springfield and actually met the governor there for a press conference to talk about this is the type of transportation project, so-called shovel-ready, that this is the type of thing that we should use the $700 million for.
I know the president got a lot of criticism even over using that term, shovel-ready, with the assumption that nothing is completely at that, ready-to-move stage. And I think you set a perfect example of, everything's already been studied, it's been evaluated on, the land use, environmental, and,
a lot of
every
people
regard.
are going to be disappointed because projects that they've wanted really badly and that are needed probably won't fit the criteria here.
Yeah.
There's already talk, as you may know, at the federal level about a second stimulus package, and maybe the criteria will be different then to be able to encompass other types of projects or things that have a little bit longer lead time.
Yeah. Do you have any idea of how much of that, you said $700 million is going to be divvied up for projects in Northern Virginia? I
don't really know. I think we'll get our fair share of it because we do have stuff going on here that's in the pipeline now. We're doing well now for Northern with receiving our quote fair share unquote of the money. And partly that's because of the federal earmarks that have come down over time. Earmarks have a bad name, but the earmark is the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. That was our most famous earmark in our area. The two interchanges in Maryland and two in Virginia were not part of the earmark, but they're part of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge project, and we do have 20% of Virginia money in those. And those are very expensive, very, very expensive. And right on the edge of my district, the Telegraph Road Beltway project is a $237 million project that's been underway for about 6 or 8 months now and moving along really quite nicely. So we are getting, because the federal government selects our projects more or less now, because we would not be responsible if we didn't put up the 20% if we're getting 80%. Are
you putting like a portfolio of the shovel-ready projects, up for, evaluation?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Secretary Homer is working on getting that done. I have not seen the final Virginia list yet, so I'm not exactly sure what percentage we're going to get. But my hunch, and just the project I mentioned earlier in Springfield, is going to take a good bit of the $700 million, our share of it.
Yeah, that's an area that definitely needs continuous, redevelopment. I think a lot of the criticism, or there was a lot of criticism surrounding the stimulus, just giving money away to the states. I read a couple statistics by way of how many jobs were actually saved. For state employees.
Right.
7,000?
7,000 jobs is what we were told is what we saved, and what we would have, that's the number of people we would have had to lay off, not just direct state employees, but people that depend on, that work in nursing homes. 70% of the people in nursing homes in Virginia, in most states, are on Medicaid, and that is a federal state partnership. Teachers, university professors.
And on the same front, that they held the increase in the higher education rate. So going to be between, I think, 2 to 5% of an increase, and I'd heard exponentially higher numbers if they hadn't been able to control the budget.
We would have had to cut higher education by 15% if we hadn't got this money. And of the stimulus package, $127 million is going into higher education.
And with a fair share also going $365 to K through 12.
Right.
So I know all of our local teachers are very thankful for that, because that's been an argument between state and local, because it's a balancing act between the funding sources.
The local jurisdictions too, when you're a richer jurisdiction like Fairfax and Loudoun County and Arlington, Alexandria, we pay a disproportionately high share of it. And so it helps us too, but it even helps the poorer jurisdictions much more, because through the formula, this will really save their bacon in rural areas and in the inner city school system, say in Portsmouth, Norfolk, places like that.
Where the development is needed. And I don't mind putting the investment dollars down there, even if it's
whole state.
It's disproportionately their share. It goes for the health of the country, or the state as a whole.
Even in Fairfax, the Board of Supervisors was happy. We get the biggest dollar amount. It's just percentage-wise, not probably because we have 167,000 students. What I think it should be if we had a little bit fairer formula, but we are a commonwealth, and so we have to be concerned about every child in the state getting a good education. Absolutely.
I also want to invite our listeners, you can join us on the show. Call in at 571-749-1166. The lines are open for your questions, comments, anything in between. Let's see, with the budget process and the stimulus, we've protected the jobs, had to soften any of the cuts in education and healthcare, as you said. What about public safety?
Money was put back into that, and the governor had a modest proposal on nonviolent offenders possibly being let out of prison 60 days earlier than they would have, and that failed. And I think there were some problems with it, but the whole area of prison reform is something that we need to work on in the years ahead. You know, Senator Webb at the federal level has taken this on as something that that he wants to work on. There needs to be more creative ways and less expensive ways. We cannot, even though building these prisons is great economic development, or it's considered such in some of our more rural counties, we keep having to build more and more prisons, and we have over 35,000 people in the state prison now, and it's expensive. It's one of the areas of spending in Virginia where we are at basically the national average, because most spending categories in Virginia were between 40 and 50, and for instance, our Medicaid program, which is 16% of our budget, is ranked 48th in the country. I mean, it's very austere.
Well, explain that a little bit for me, because I might take objection to the comment that it's good economic development to build more prisons, to
well,
put more people in prison.
I'm not saying that's a good but it is considered. I mean, some of these counties in Virginia will compete to get them, and some legislators from that area that have a high unemployment will work hard to get it in their jurisdiction if you have to build one rather than another jurisdiction. That's
or rather
what I really meant by that.
Investing in rehabilitation and other means for the mentally ill, or substance abuse, to keep people out of jail.
There's a lot of good ways that we could spend money in rehabilitation that we don't get to, and most of these, as you know, most of these people are going to join us back in society someday, and sometimes we don't do as good a job with that as we ought to.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's a much more, I guess, long-term and complex issue. You don't see the immediate dividends, and there's not a dollar figure that you can compute. It's, someone's life, which is a little bit more ambiguous. Again, feel free to call in and join us with this conversation. Let's touch on, in a quick moment before our break, the gun show loophole. Maybe give us a little bit of the background before we break about how the bill originated a year ago, I believe a year ago.
Well, there have been bills submitted since I've been in, and much preceding my joining the General Assembly, having to do with having background checks done for everybody at every purchaser at a gun show. Most of the arms sellers at the gun shows have a federal firearms license, and they're usually stores that bring their stock out to a gun show, and those folks under existing law have to do a background check. But if you're a private seller or have a collection you want to sell, or you just want to sell one gun, there's no mechanism now at a gun show to do a background check on someone who may want to buy it. And I think that the proposals would be, people are worried about this getting into a background check for all person, like if I wanted to sell you a gun, I'd have to do a background check on you. But my opinion is, we have such a critical mass of people coming to these that it shouldn't be a problem to help the seller know what the purchaser's background is. And I think someday this is going to pass, and I hope it passes, but right now, guns are pretty much sacrosanct in our state.
I think that says it in its entirety. It may have originated or gotten a little bit more publicity out of the tragedy at Virginia Tech, but we'll talk about the gun show loophole when we come back from this break.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
Here again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Thank you for joining us on the Inside Scoop Virginia. My name is Shannon Sullivan, your host this evening. We have the Virginia Politics Hour with our guest, Mark Sickles, who is a delegate in the Virginia General Assembly. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Good to be here.
Right before the break, we were talking about the gun show loophole. It's not a new piece of legislation, as you pointed out. It got a little bit more publicity.
After Virginia Tech.
Unfortunately so.
Right.
And I believe as all of the investigation unraveled with that, it was unfortunately a mentally ill student that perpetrated the tragedy. And I think that's a lot of the conversation behind the gun show loophole, where it is, these are private vendors.
Right.
You know, and as you said, you know, it's very sacrosanct to be, you know, starting that conversation. But we do have individuals, and this might be someone that has a mental illness. It could be a felon. It could be someone that has some sort of domestic violence type background, but we're not running any background checks. What's the argument? Is it financially trying to overcome this? Is it just?
I think it's a slippery slope argument that if two private individuals wanted to have a transaction between them, that there would need to be a background check done, and that's what they're doing at a gun show versus me going to your house to buy it. And so they view it as a slippery slope. Now, the Senate bill, which I'm not an expert on, but this thing passes the Senate, has provisions in it that try to protect private transactions, try to make it clear this is only for gun shows, and it's not going to get into private sales between Shannon and Mark. And so, but still, I think the biggest argument against it is the slippery slope argument. Several states, I believe Colorado, a very, you know, mostly rural state, they passed it by referendum. We don't have the you know, a referendum law where citizens can just directly pass laws in Virginia, but they did that in Colorado, and I think their gun shows are just in great shape. I think they're fine. I don't think it's hurt their business.
It's a business, and I think that the format of these gun shows needs to even be elaborated upon. These aren't, you know, haphazard, you know, people, you know, meeting and exchanging things, you know, casually. It's usually at a convention center. You probably have, you know, exhibitor licenses, you know, people are registering to be there ahead of time, you know, stocking their merchandise, preparing for such an event. So, you know, procedurally to ask, at least in my opinion, you know, for that background check, it would come as a part of doing that business.
Most of the time it's not very burdensome to have a background check done, the computer system. Sometimes if you have a very, very common name, Joe Smith, you know, it'll take longer to find out which Joe Smith you are, and people get frustrated by that. But if you have a unique name, it tells you real fast whether you're ineligible or not. We have fixed Virginia law with regard to what happened in the Cho case down in Blacksburg, and that was just a terrible case of things falling through the cracks in the mental health system and in our system of putting people who have become, who have been committed in a judicial system into the background check system. And you know, he wasn't in there, so he legally purchased 2 handguns 1 month apart and without being flagged. So hopefully that won't happen again. And I know a lot of consideration was made for the privacy of the individuals in merging these databases, because there was a lot of concern that came out of that as well. There was another piece of gun legislation that actually passed. It passed. It's at the governor's desk. Yeah.
The concealed handgun, are we talking about the same piece of legislation? Why don't you describe that?
Technically, Virginia does not have bars. We have restaurants. They must sell food that have an ABC license. And Virginia is one of the few states that doesn't allow someone who has a concealed carry permit. That person has had training, not as good as I would like to see, but they have had some training, and they've had a background check done before they can get a concealed carry permit. But under Virginia law now, they cannot take that gun into an establishment with an ABC license. However, in Virginia, if you carry your gun openly, you can carry it in any restaurant unless the restaurant owner doesn't want you. The current law allows you to even drink alcohol carrying a gun openly in Virginia. Most people do not know that.
No.
Most of my constituents don't know that. So arguably, if you're carrying concealed and you've had a background check done and we know you're not mentally ill and you've had some training and you know how to obviously use the weapon, you would be somewhat safer. The bill said, unlike open carry, the bill said you cannot drink alcohol at all. If you carry openly, you can drink as long as you don't become inebriated. And so this will say no alcohol at all. Now how is the server supposed to know whether or not...
You must have read my mind, because that's exactly what I was going to
that's why the restaurant industry in Virginia is opposed to the bill. How would they know whether somebody is... that's one of the reasons.
I think a potential liability for them.
They think that way, yes. I mean, with some logic. So the bill said, as it came over from the Senate, this passed the Senate relatively easily. It never passed, ironically, when the Republicans were in control, but when the Democrats took control a year or so ago, we have several rural Democrats with pretty good pro-Second Amendment in the jargon records, and they passed it pretty easily. And the governor vetoed it last year, and it's on his desk right now. It'll be before us again, or before the Senate. Probably he'll veto it again. I have my personal opinion is I think the bill's going to probably become law sooner or later because of the illogic of the current system, in my opinion. But the House took out the provision that the Senate had put in that said if you're carrying concealed in a restaurant, you have to tell the ABC manager or somebody in the restaurant that you're carrying concealed, so they would know not to serve you any alcohol whatsoever.
And they struck that from
the House took that out and sent it back, and the Senate accepted that amendment. And so now the governor has a choice. He can either just veto the bill, or he can make recommendations to it, and if to fix it. And if we don't approve on a majority vote his recommendations, then he can decide whether to veto it again. And so that will be one little bit of information coming out of the April 8th reconvened session.
I mean, if the amendment had stayed where, you tell the ABC manager, I would see that there's no difference between, being able to drink and not being able to drink. I mean, you have disclosed, essentially, it's open, except, only between a certain number of individuals.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I guess that's the minutia of state legislation. Let's move a little bit to a slightly similar piece of legislation that went through, and this, I guess, also treads on what's sacrosanct in Virginia. I have a little clip that I want to share with everyone on, I guess, the national view of Virginia politics.
Times are a change, and the governor of Virginia has signed a new law banning smoking in bars and restaurants in Virginia. So that's significant because Virginia is like the tobacco state. That would be like the governor of California banning breast implants. Yeah, you can't have the boobs here. There's no more boobs here. They're not real. And last week, West Virginia.
That's funny, Shannon. You've got a good point there. I didn't expect it myself. I was completely surprised by the deal that the governor was able to strike with the speaker on this. I didn't see it coming. I have a lot of people in my district that have contacted me about making Virginia's indoor air clean, and some of them have health problems. And the consensus in the scientific community is that secondhand smoke is bad for people. And so I would always kind of dampen their hopes by saying, well, I would like to help you, I wish I could help you, but this is Virginia. We're the largest cigarette manufacturer in the world, and we have a lot of tobacco farmers. We grow a lot of tobacco in our state.
Are they able to prove, I guess in some measure or another, the duration, I guess, so that you're in a restaurant or exposed in these, closed facilities, actually will impact your health?
I think they have studies of people who work in this environment.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you spend a little time in there, but this is really a worker health and safety issue to me, to people that, this is their job and they have to breathe it all day long. And I think that people will be very happy with this. Even smokers tell me they're happy with it sometimes, and even though they like smoking, they don't necessarily want to smell someone else's dirty air. And what I've noticed anecdotally too is if you travel to a state that's banned smoking inside, people love it. I mean, people don't want to go back to the other way. You'll never go back once you go smoke-free. And I'm really happy that we were able to do this.
And I think that the arguments were probably a little softer by way of having, DC already having passed a similar piece.
Well, Delegate Brink actually had a bill that had some logic to it that we would take Planning District 8, which is Loudoun, Prince William, in and have a smoking ban in restaurants there because there would be no competitive impacts between Maryland and the District of Columbia. But we didn't need to do that, obviously.
Yeah, I think that even if they were to make the argument that people are going to go to West Virginia or North Carolina, you're really diluting your argument by way of a business standpoint.
Right.
And then I know I heard this, the critics out there saying, well, the poor waitresses that choose that as an occupation, they are taking that upon themselves, a risk of employment.
Right.
And that's just cynical.
Yeah.
And unfortunate, actually.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm very happy that we were able to do this, and maybe the most important bill that's passed in my 6 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the home of tobacco is changing a little bit. We have a couple sacrosanct issues we've discussed, guns and tobacco, and a little bit of a progressive future for Virginia somewhere in the mix. I can only be optimistic.
Well, we have to take things slow in Virginia. We do have a very good business environment that we want to continue to have because our economic strength is good compared to other states.
Absolutely. Please join us at 571-749-1166. We'll be back in a few moments.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. And in the next few years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
Here again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My name is Shannon Sullivan, your host this evening on the Virginia edition of the Inside Scoop. My guest this evening is Mark Sickles, a delegate in the Virginia House of Delegates and 43rd District representing Fairfax County. We actually have a caller on the line who we have Jason from Falls Church, I believe, has a question for myself or Delegate Mark Sickles. Jason, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening. I'd like to, I own a handgun. I was wondering, what is the law regarding carrying that as a businessman? First of all, I'm a resident in Falls Church, and so I'd like to know what the rules and regulations are. And basically, that's what I'd like to find out.
Thank you, Jason.
Well, Jason, I think that you should call the clerk of the court's office in Fairfax County, and they can give you the exact rules and regulations if you want to carry concealed. If your status as a businessman is not relevant, if you want to carry the gun in Virginia openly in a holster on your hip, that is illegal now. You can't carry it in a church, in a courthouse, or on school grounds. But other than that, in Virginia, you can carry it openly. But if you want to carry concealed, there are regulations that you need to follow and apply for a permit. You'll need to have some training, and you'll have to have a background check done. And it's not that difficult, but we have about 150,000 people in Virginia, a little bit more than that have a concealed carry permit.
Interesting. I never knew that maybe that's a high number. I never actually put a number to it.
When the concealed carry law passed 8 or 9, 10 years ago, it was a movement around the country in various states to do this. Most states have a concealed carry program, and they vary with relative difficulty on how hard it is to get one. I would say Virginia is not that hard compared to other states. There are some states it's very difficult. Now there's a big debate going on in the District of Columbia right now because the Supreme Court ruled that there's an individual right under the Constitution on a gun. And the D.C. City Council, according to it looks like a majority of members in Congress, think that the rules that they have developed are so stringent that it's tantamount to a ban. And so I think there's going to be a lot of litigation in this area. But Virginia's program's on pretty sound ground right now. There was things that I would like to see a little bit tougher about it, but I support the right of a person who is a law-abiding citizen to own a gun. Yeah, training could be a little bit, we have a lot of exceptions from the training, and we have no renewal. Once you do it one time, you don't have to go back 5 years later, like you might in a driver's license situation for some people. Right now, if you're over 80 years old, you have to get a driver's license permit every year now. So, I mean, I think there needs to be some reasonable protections for the public for making sure that people that are carrying deadly firearms know what they're doing. But we have a very low crime rate here, and some people argue it's because we have so many legal carriage of guns, but I'm not sure that's true.
I don't know, proven a negative. It's
I would agree that it's a person's right to be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope, Jason, that we answered your question. Again, feel free to join us. We're taking your questions, your comments. The number is 571-749-1166. Let's shift the topics a little bit. Talk about absentee voting, or maybe just actually some broad strokes about the voting in Virginia, the actual how restrictive it is, how difficult it is to register, to vote absentee, and how this good piece of legislation that unfortunately didn't pass, how that came about.
Well, I'm on the Privileges and Elections Committee, so I hear these bills every year. And generally speaking, I tend to vote to open up the process more rather than less. Last year, we had a lot of people that were de facto early voting. I mean, if you went to one of the satellite voting centers in Fairfax County on a Saturday, some people waited 3 hours in line to vote. We had until the session 17 different reasons for that you would have to check off for the reason that you're going to vote. And if you're going to be out of town on business, that is a legitimate reason. I believe it says you have to be gone for 11 of the 13 hours that the polls are open. They're open from 6 until 7.
It also says out of the county of residence on business. So for a lot of our transient population, that covers them.
Right. And while I actually couldn't stay in the district this year. I like to talk to voters, but I had business that I had to do in the city all day on Election Day this year, and I considered voting absentee myself, but I didn't do it because I read that and I couldn't really guarantee that I'd be gone for that whole time, so I didn't do it. I just got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and got in line. There were 80 people in front of me, but that I'm sure there are a lot of good people and that are not following the letter of the law but still voting early, and it is just ridiculous because so many people voted early that we have de facto early voting. So there were bills in to make it legal and make it so you don't have to have an excuse. I mean, no excuse. We've had bills to have no excuse voting for people over 65. That's failed. This year we did pass a bill that Delegate Cosgrove from Chesapeake had put in that said first responders could vote without an excuse. Now, they're, as far as I know, I think they're the only category of worker that now has no excuse absentee. They don't have to say, I'm working that day, because the theory is an emergency might happen and they would have to work and they would lose their opportunity to vote. Some people argued in the committee that there are people that have less control even over their own schedules than a firefighter EMT might have, and an obstetrician maybe, you know, and maybe they should be. But the registrars around the state that didn't have the amount of early voting, de facto early voting that we had in Northern Virginia, they were opposed to the bill because of they would have to staff up. The state didn't have any money to pay for it, and so that was enough excuse to stop the bill. But somehow, where there was a lot of demand for this early voting, we paid for it anyway. I mean, we paid for it here in Fairfax. People, I think up to 30% of the people in Fairfax County voted early this year. So
it was very impressive. I guess the voting history in Virginia has taken a negative, or has been negative in the past, mostly to repress turnout. And, you know, in the back of my mind, I can't help but think that, you know, this initiative was trying to overcome that in a small way, to make it a more open, as you said, transparent process. So anyone that's, you know, willing, registered, can do so at their, you know, most convenient moment, and not have those unfortunate turns of events which will allow them or prevent them from voting.
You know, someday we really ought to think about doing it on a day other than Tuesday as well.
I think it should be a holiday, personally. I think it should be a federal holiday.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. In Northern Virginia, I think it would be very, and you couldn't do this just in Northern Virginia, but it would be helpful to have the polling places open till 8 p.m. D.C. and Maryland both vote till 8 p.m. and you hear that on the news, on the radio, and some people get it in their mind that it's 8 o'clock. And I personally saw a woman come to the polls this year where I was 15 or 20 minutes, you know, after 7, and she wasn't even in a hurry because she thought she had all the time in the world that couldn't vote. Now, I don't know how often that happens, but we have bad traffic here, and we're not making any progress, and it's another topic to talk about. We're not making any progress on improving our time in a car, and you know, getting home at night, 8 o'clock would give people more time to get home. Now, I tell you what, as a practical matter is going on, nobody in the last couple of elections, the people were so motivated to vote in 2006 and 2008 because they were so frustrated with the past administration, that people didn't vote at night. They wanted to make sure that something didn't happen after work, and almost everybody's voting in the morning now. It used to be that a third of the people would vote in the morning before work, a third through the whole day, and then another third at night. And now it's almost everybody who's still working in the workforce votes in the morning, just because they want to make sure they don't miss it.
So the majority of the arguments were actually based on the registrar's objections?
That's a lot of it. We hear that a lot, and it is disconcerting. And I understand their point of view because they have a hard job, and sometimes there's only 1 or 2 of them in these small counties. But it is really something that we need. That should not be the reason that we don't expand opportunity to vote. It really
I'll
shouldn't.
agree with you there. I was afraid that the main argument would be the case of fraud, that they were going to try to make that there's some sort of use of the system that's rampant. And I don't know how you're going to prove that.
The opportunity for fraud and absentee voting is greater through the mail than it is if you're voting in person. As a matter of fact, I voted absentee in person in the Sharon Bulova election, special election, about a month before her election day on February 3rd. And I mean, you have to sign a form, you have to go through and check these things, and I had to show my ID. So if you're going to voting early in person provides less chance for fraud than
even
just voting absentee.
In the mail
generally.
variety, unless you're stealing other people's identities and filling out multiple applications, you might be stretching your excuse. You know, I'm not going to be out of the county on business.
Well, our friends on the Republican
You're still
side
voting
are
and you're
just
still
are really focused on this. They tend to think there's a lot of fraud out there, and I think people that have looked into it have found out that there's no fraud at all. And the whole ACORN thing last time was really about absentee ballot applications that ACORN itself found were not correct, and they notified people they weren't correct. They weren't a absentee ballot, they were just the application to get an absentee ballot.
Yeah.
So
a lot was made of that, but that's just political brouhaha.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the same thing I would like to say or see something changed with registering to vote. I think we have a very restrictive registration system. And maybe it's fraud, maybe it's political willingness, registrars.
Well, their technology is going to help us a little bit there, Shannon, because I had a bill a couple years ago that presumes that we're moving to electronic poll books, which we are, and away from paper. And with that bill, the number of days before the election that you can register was dropped from the current 28 days to 21 days. And next year, it'll be only 21 days. Now, the bill is introduced, had 14 days, and this was a Board of Elections bill. This wasn't my idea. They asked me to carry the bill. And the registrars didn't like or were nervous about 14 days before the election, so that's why it ended up back at 21. But as the electronic poll books get used and people get more comfortable with them, and you won't have these lines at A through M and N through Z or whatever, because the whole voter file will be on each machine, so you'll have separate lines, but not by alphabet. And people get comfortable with the electronic poll book. I think they'll be able to register people faster, and the paperwork system won't get bogged down. So there's a little hope there.
Maybe somewhere in the mix we can solve the black hole at the Department of Motor Vehicles, where our motor voter applications seem to disappear into a basement if you don't check the right box. And
it's really amazing that Virginia does as well as it does with the number of people that work in this area. I mean, it's just, people would be shocked at how few people work at the Board of Elections in Richmond, and the big job they have down there. Somehow we haven't had too many problems. But we need to do things to open up the system, make sure everybody votes as often as they can, and make it easier on people.
I think so, and that the fact that the argument still comes back to there being potential for fraud, I think is, you're warranted to your opinions, but a little bit exaggerated. Let's open up the process, make it easier to vote early, absentee-wise, even register to vote in a timely manner.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. you can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
Here again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My name is Shannon Sullivan, your host this evening. We have the Virginia Political Hour. The guest tonight is Mark Sickles, delegate in the Virginia General Assembly, 43rd District. Mark, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about some of your bioscience research bills? You actually had quite a few healthcare and health industry related bills.
Yeah, Shannon, I've carried legislation like that primarily because I'm on the Health, Welfare, and Institution Committee and have learned a little bit in the last 6 years about how our programs work, and also on the Commerce and Labor Committee, which covers all insurance issues as well as other issues like energy and telecommunications. But I've got really good committee assignments. One of the bioscience thing came about because I was talking about what other states are doing. I have friends in the industry. Maryland has a great emphasis on this, and it really is a bedrock of their economy across the river, both with Johns Hopkins and all the research that's done there, and NIH. And the corridor, the 270 corridor, is focused on the earliest biosciences. Mm-hmm. Then in North Carolina and the Research Triangle, there's 50,000 people that work in that area in biosciences, life sciences. We're sandwiched between two states that are doing a lot. We're not really doing much. And during the Warner administration, he had a commission on this that brought all the leaders in Virginia together, and they came up with some pretty aggressive suggestions on how we ought to pursue this. But they fell by the wayside, and my thought was that the legislative branch needs to take this up, because this is the future of jobs, the future of our economy.
Absolutely.
And so last year, I got a study passed. It was a one-year joint subcommittee to bring people together to talk about what we ought to be doing in the future. We also have a biosciences caucus now with many members on both parties involved in it. The bill passed. It was my bill, so I was able to chair the committee last year. And first thing we did was look at what is being done now. We do have some programs that help technology companies, and we brought in the larger technology community, and we reformed how the limited dollars that we do spend on research is targeted to bringing university research to the marketplace quicker by matching the federal grants that go to our scientists at our universities, and reforming the angel investor tax credit so that at least half of the tax credit total volume has to go to projects that have a relationship to one of our institutions of higher education. We're doing this to try to bring the right faculty to Virginia, to retain the faculty that we have. Our good faculty, of course, is under a lot of stress, people compete for them, and we don't want to lose faculty to other states that are doing so much more than we are. So this is, we had a legislative proposal came out of this. The bill that ended up passing, if people want to look it up on our system, is SB 1338. Senator Herring from Loudoun County carried the bill, and the bill got caught up in some what I thought was unrelated stem cell politics, because we didn't really talk about stem cell, embryonic stem cell research. What we were focused on in our work was getting the most out of our limited dollars. But it became a big issue within the Republican caucus, particularly in the House, and we do have some language on the bill now that I think is unfortunate that will limit money from coming out of these programs in Virginia going into embryonic stem cell research, even though a week or so later, we have a little bit at VCU Medical Center and Medical College of Virginia has a little bit they're doing, but really embryonic stem cell research is not going on in Virginia. And the technology community wanted the bill, regardless of this language being in it, and now that the Obama administration has changed its policy and the NIH is going to be drafting new rules on embryonic stem cell research in the next 6 months, Virginia University professors and scientists will be able to draw down the federal money. They just won't be able to get our matching money that goes with this program.
You mentioned, well, that the embryonic stem cell wasn't a target or wasn't specifically something you were looking at. Are there other industries that you're looking to court to bring in to develop?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry, writ large. We have some things that are going on. We have a biotechnology park that's a partnership with the jurisdictions in the Richmond metropolitan region and VCU that's very successful. We have a lot of things going on in Blacksburg and in a little bit in Charlottesville. And in George Mason up here, the Manassas campus is targeted to be the focus of this kind of research in the future. The FBI is spending money there on biodefense research, and we want to, or the university wants to develop that larger. We have a problem with wet lab space where scientists can work outside of a university setting and taking ideas at the very earliest time in their life into the commercial space. And we don't have that in Northern Virginia. We've had people that have told me they once they get to a certain point in Northern Virginia, particularly George Mason University professors, they have to take their idea across the river to Maryland to find a place to work. And we've lost, these are very small companies, and this is not in our huge economy in Northern Virginia, this is not a big deal, but it is a threat to our long-term growth, because this is the life science industry is going to change
everything starts as a small idea.
That's
so
right.
You never know where it's going to develop.
We want to make sure this doesn't become a problem in the future, more of a problem.
Absolutely. Well, in our last few minutes, let's shake it up and talk about the attitude down in Richmond. I know in previous years there's been, more than partisanship. I don't have a problem with, that term. Everyone's entitled to your opinion and have at it. I think it brings out the best in our system. It's the pettiness that goes on. It's the actual vindictiveness that we've seen. How has this last session been? How's the general attitude?
Well, this was our short session. It only lasted 6 weeks. It wasn't real partisan. There were some gotcha bills, some bills that my Republican friends put in to make us vote, take some what they consider bad votes. People are nervous about the election because we've been doing so well on our side. In the House of Delegates, the last place where the Republicans hold power in the state, significant power. Of course, they have the lieutenant governorship and the attorney general's office. But we're going to have a lot of interesting battles going on this year to really focus on what kind of state we want to be. I mean, do we want to be Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, or do we want to be a state that's got a forward-looking economy, a 21st century economy? Are we going to invest in higher education? Are we going to stay out of people's personal lives and have tolerance for everybody and welcome people instead of trying to, be a place where people don't want to come to?
And if only I had time to play a couple Jeff Frederick clips, I think that would answer every single one of those questions.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? There's an election this year for the House of Delegates, every 2 years, obviously. And it's of particular importance because we're coming up on a census. As unabashed Democrats, what does that look like?
Well, we need to pick up 6 seats in the House of Delegates to win. That's going to be hard to do, but I think we can do it. We have a very good recruiting effort underway. Got some good candidates that want to run and to serve. I think that the Republicans are trying to find good candidates to run against us too. I'm really curious to see what their issues are going to be here in Northern Virginia. I don't see anything coming from their party about how we're going to solve our transportation infrastructure problems, for starters, how we're going to, in the long term, support our higher education community. So I think there'll be some interesting races. A few of them will be here in Northern Virginia, and a few of them will be in rural areas, and a few of them will be in Hampton Roads. And so,
well, I think that's telling. That, you know, your natural assumptions of people's partisanship, you know, Democrat, Republican, isn't limited to rural versus urban. That
Right.
people in general are looking to the issues, what a person stands for, their character, and what they're actually going to accomplish.
I think if the economy remains like it is, Shannon, this will be a lot about the who is going to put us in a position to create the best economy possible for our kids in the future. How we're going to bring jobs to rural Virginia. How do we keep people in Virginia versus going to other places?
And I
we're
think
very,
it's not an issue that the Republicans have a stranglehold on anymore. I mean, under Democratic administrations for the last two gubernatorial cycles, I mean, best managed state.
Right.
We've
got a really good thing going here in Virginia. We don't want to mess it up. We want to make sure that we're focusing our resources into the things that are going to make our economy the engine it has been, that we're good partners to the federal government. We get more money per capita from the federal government than any other state. It's kind of helping us, obviously, every time there's national downturns like this. While our unemployment rate is too high in Virginia, it's lower than it is on a national basis. We need to work with our federal partners. We need to make sure we have an education system that can get people into the jobs, the shortages we have. We got to make sure Northern Virginia Community College is well funded so that all the kids that are going there, not just kids, either career changers, adults and midlife career changes,
that's a key point.
Can get their education there to fit into the jobs in the new economy. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we do have a great starting point and a better starting point. Most states would trade with us in our economy, so we're very fortunate that way.
Definitely hearing the various candidates on the House level, also looking, you know, at the statewide candidates. It's looking forward, all of their platforms, you know, regardless of, you know, what
elections are about the future, you know. That's what they're about. You can talk about the past, but really people vote on what are you going to do for me now.
Absolutely. Right. And where all politics is local, what you have done means a little bit, but we're always looking to make sure, you know, you have a roof over your head, you have a paycheck that's coming in, roads that you can drive on, and a sustainable economy. So I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening.
It's been good to be here.
This has been the Virginia Politics Hour with our guest, Mark Sickles. Touched on a whole bunch of topics and the colorful Virginia politics that it is.